Hello friend, welcome back to our annual pantry tour. So we have been working very hard for the last 6-ish months or so to stock this pantry with homemade things. And I'm really excited to share it with you. I needed to get down here, it's late November, before we started eating through too much of this. This is a working pantry. Josh and I eat out of this pantry every single day. And so I wanted to show it to you before we started depleting all the work that we have done to fill the pantry together. So if you're new, my name is Becky, and on our homestead, I have a very large garden. I have 20 raised beds that are 16 by 4 feet wide. And my goal is to grow as many fruits and vegetables in that garden as possible. We also have a small orchard and we have chickens for eggs. On our homestead, we do not grow any protein, and so I have a couple deep freezers, which is going to be part 2 of the pantry tour, where I'm going to do tours of our freezers because I like to partner with local farmers whenever possible to buy local pasture raised protein, pork, beef, things like that, chicken when possible. And then also I have done a little bit of my food preservation a little bit different this year. So yes, we did a lot of canning, but we also did a lot of freezing, which I used to do a lot of, and then I learned how to can, and then I did mostly canning, and then now I'm kind of getting back into freezing some of my homegrown things as well. And my goal when it comes to my pantry, I'm not a prepper, this is not a prepper pantry, my goal is to have the best tasting things on my pantry shelf and the highest quality possible. So what I have found is if I can purchase in bulk, so you're going to see a lot of bulk items, that I can get a better quality product for a better price. And I have learned that if I can preserve or make it from scratch at the height of ripeness, then I can have the best quality product as possible. And the reason I'm starting to the reason I'm starting to freeze more is I'm trying to figure out what is our favorite way to eat something and preserve it that way so that I get so excited to pull from the pantry and to pull from the freezer because we think it tastes absolutely delicious. And so I'm learning that I like some things frozen better and I like some things canned better. And that is the awesome thing about when you are building your own pantry, is you get to do things the way you like for your family. And for me, it is a constant evolution of figuring things out. So if you were here last pantry tour, things are going to look a little bit different. I'm going to show you this entire pantry down here, plus I'll show you my upstairs pantry. I used to store a lot of things upstairs and down here. Well, I have learned over the past year, especially this food preservation season, that I had a very hard time keeping track of my inventory. A lot of things on this pantry shelf I only preserve once a year. I make it from scratch, I put it in a jar, or I put it in the freezer one time, and I need to know how much to make so that it'll last me a whole year. Well, I found that having some things upstairs and some things downstairs, I was losing track and it was hard to know how much I needed to preserve. Along with purchasing in bulk, I was having that same problem. If I was keeping some things upstairs and some things down here, I didn't always know when I needed to order something in bulk. I was running out of things, or I was ordering things and then I would find a bunch of it down here because I just couldn't keep track. So that's one big change from last year to this year, is now well, I'll show you what it looks like upstairs. 95%, I just made that percentage up, but most of the food that I have is now down here. What that means is I will have to run downstairs more often, but that's fine if it's going to be easier for me to keep a better inventory on what I have. Now, it has taken me years to learn the skills to purchase in bulk and to learn to can and freeze these different things or make things from scratch. And it's taken me years to build up a pantry this size. I first got into buying in bulk when Josh and I first got married and we lived in a little suburban lot. And I first started liking to buy in bulk because I could get it at a better price, a better quality product, but also I didn't like to run out of things when I was in the middle of cooking. And so I like to keep a little bit extra on hand so that if I wanted to make cookies at any given time, I would have sugar, I would have butter, and things like that. Well, when 2020 hit, I was about halfway through my journey of building my pantry. And that really drove home the fact that I like to have a stocked pantry. My sister-in-law's birthday was during that time when everything was a little bit crazy, and my brother-in-law could not find flour in the grocery store, and he knew that he could ask me and I had flour to gift. And I also lost my job for a few months during 2020, and I had backup food insurance. So it was a peace of mind. I am not a prepper. This is not a prepper pantry. My goal is to just keep about a year's worth of things. And a lot of it's because I make it or I buy it in season, and I make a year's worth or I store a year's worth of flour so that I only have to either purchase it or make it once a year instead of having to make it a bunch of times. For example, we'll get into it, but like bone broth. So let's get right into it. I'm going to show you all the stuff that I have down here in this pantry, and then we'll go upstairs, and then part 2 is you will see what I have in my freezers. If you were with me when we reorganized these shelves, the way that I reorganized it is I have got my tomato products here. Here I have fruits on this shelf, and then over here we have vegetables, beans, and broth, and at the top we have condiments. And a few of you guys had mentioned to me that you would have done it a little bit different than I organized it, but that is the beauty of being in control of your own pantry, your own home, is you get to organize it the way that makes the most sense to you, and that is what I've done. So this is the way that makes the most sense to me. So this top drawer, or top drawer, this top shelf here are condiments. Here we have barbecue sauce, sweet and sour sauce, a rhubarb barbecue sauce that is phenomenal, plum sauce, and zucchini relish. Now, I do not have labels on here because I know what's in them and I have them marked on the top and I know where these things are. And we do not have bungee cords. I figured I would do this tour before I put the bungee cords on. We have invested in bungee cords. Josh is going to come down here after I do the tour and he's going to put the bungee cords on for me so that these aren't just going to fall off the front or the back. But that is what we have on this shelf. Now over here, I've got hot sauces. I love hot sauce. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different hot sauces. We've got a roasted cayenne pepper hot sauce, sriracha sauce, just a cayenne pepper hot sauce, tomatillo jalapeno hot sauce, and peach pepper hot sauce. It's a Sugar Rush peach pepper. That's the name of the pepper, plus peaches are in it, and it is so good. Here, these are one of my favorite things we canned, and this is one reason why I needed to come down here and do this tour. These are a bunch of different kinds of just peppers that I canned up with garlic. Those little white chunks in there are garlic, and I like to use these peppers, these little jars, as when a recipe calls for jarred peppers, I grab one of those. We have cowboy candy, which is a sweet pickled jalapeno. This is corn relish. This is one of our favorite things. I made this for the first time last year, and we use this anytime we have burrito bowls or enchiladas or anytime we have Mexican food and I don't feel like making up a corn salsa. I love to make roasted corn salsas, but sometimes I don't have the energy to do that, and so this comes in handy. It is so delicious. It's sweet, it's a little bit spicy, it's got some vinegar in it, and it's just so good. Here is another favorite. This is salsa verde with tomatillos, and we've got, I think I have 14 jars, which should be enough to get us through the year. We use this as a condiment for just salsa, but I also use it as green enchilada sauce. And the salsa verde is probably one of Josh's favorite things I make. Now, this is also enchilada sauce. This is a traditional red enchilada sauce, and I didn't have to make this year because I made enough last year, and it is so good as well. I will link a playlist because we preserved almost all of these things together, I think. So I do have videos on almost everything. So what I will do is link a playlist with all the canning stuff, and so you can go to that playlist and look for enchilada sauce if you want to see how I make enchilada sauce. I will also link some resources on where I buy my bulk goods and the containers I use to store in bulk, and just some resources on learning how to build a pantry of this size, because there is a skill in not only learning how to make these things, but learning how to store them properly. So I will link that down below if you are interested in that. From our enchilada sauce, we have here, this is Sloppy Joe base. This has peppers and onions and tomatoes and brown sugar, a little bit of vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, so onions. So all you have to do to have really yummy Sloppy Joes is brown up some ground beef, open a jar, and you have one of the fastest and easiest meals. This is something new to me this year. This is tomato jam, and I have not used it yet this year. I am thinking that we will use it the way that we use ketchup, which is this right here is ketchup. I think ketchup is probably one of the hardest things to make, and we like the flavor of this ketchup. We don't like it as well as our favorite Portland ketchup. Do I think I'm gonna make ketchup again? I don't know. This ketchup is good, but it's not as good as our favorite. So this tomato jam tastes like ketchup. It's sweet, it's vinegary. So when I'm out of this ketchup, I think we're gonna use this as ketchup, but I'm not sure. I also have a friend that likes to use this as a chicken marinade with some cider vinegar. They use this and cider vinegar on chicken, and so I need to try that. I just haven't tried it yet. And then this is pizza sauce, and we really like this pizza sauce, but when we do the freezer tour, I found a new recipe for frozen pizza sauce that is so good. I love the jarred pizza sauce because it's convenient, but I like the flavor of the freezer recipe I found. So next growing season, I want to try to find a canning recipe that tastes like my freezer pizza sauce, but the convenience of it being on the shelf. But we also really like this pizza sauce. Down here, okay, so these are two brand new things to me. Some of the tomato products I did this year, I am so happy with. I grew enough tomatoes to put up for Josh and I for a year. This first thing, diced tomatoes. I don't know why I've never made diced tomatoes before. I made them this year, and I needed to get down here and do the tour because I keep opening these jars and I wanted to be able to show you that we have homegrown, home diced tomatoes that are phenomenal. And then this is bruschetta, and I've been using this the same way I used diced tomatoes, but this has a little bit more flavor for a really quick sauce. It has some white wine and balsamic vinegar, and you can see the basil in there and garlic. This is really good, really good. So we've got two different kind of diced tomato things on the pantry shelf. I have been on a journey this year to learn, like I mentioned earlier, to put things in jars that are our absolute favorite, so that when we come down here, I'm so excited to open jars. So one thing I'm doing is I am not skipping any steps when it comes to canning, which you should never do because canning is a science and the rules need to be followed. And I have found that by doing things exactly by the book is not only are you guaranteed to have a safe product that way, but you are also going to have a higher quality product. So I used to not remove the skins from my tomatoes, which is a big no-no. And I did it because I was skipping steps. And I have learned it is not worth skipping the step because not only is it a safe product on my shelf, but it also, the texture is so much better and the flavor is better because the texture is better. So this is homemade marinara sauce. It's roasted marinara sauce. So incredibly delicious. I have 2, 4, 6, 7 quarts and 1/2 pint. We will go through this very quickly. We've already, I think, gone through 3 or 4 quarts of this. Now, this is another thing that we have been enjoying already. This is a roasted tomato soup, and for very easy dinners or lunches, grill up some grilled cheese, open this. I could not be more happy with how the roasted tomato soup and the roasted marinara sauce came out this year. Both of these recipes are in a cookbook my mother-in-law let me borrow, and they are our new favorite things that I have on the pantry shelf. The next, well, I was gonna go this way, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and go down. So we'll stay with the tomato products. So we just did the top shelf and the second shelf. So now let's go here. When I can tomato products, I like to reserve some of the tomato juice or tomato water and can this up separate. And I use this in chilies or to make rice. And it thickens up your sauce quicker because you don't have to cook down as much liquid. But it also gives you this product so you can use this in your cooking as well. It's not as thick as a store-bought tomato juice. If you shake it up, it is red. But it's almost like tomato water, and it's got a really yummy tomato flavor. And I like to do that as a way to kind of get 2 products for the price of 1. Now here we have, this is what I did last year, and I'm really happy with it. It is tomato, onions, and garlic together. And I pressure canned this. And I really like this, but I think next year I'm only going to make this roasted marinara sauce and crushed tomatoes. So down here, I have just crushed tomatoes. I have pints and quarts, and this was last year's. That's why I was able to gift so many tomatoes away this year from the garden, because I was able to get our yearly needs plus what we had last year, so I was able to gift some of it. Now here's another thing. This is salsa. This salsa is delicious, but we don't really use this salsa for eating with chips. In the freezer, I have a freezer salsa that I made this year, and it is so good. And we like to use this more as a chili base because it's got onions and peppers and cilantro and lemon. If I make taco soup in the crock pot or chili or something like that, I like to just open a jar of this, and it's got tomatoes and onions and peppers and a bunch of things already in it. All I have to do is ground some beef, add some broth, and we've got a really quick dinner. So that is salsa. And then we did this shelf, that's crushed tomatoes. So now we can go over to our fruit section, which is in the middle here. We already did the top, which are the condiments. So here we have apple butter. This is the first time I've made apple butter, and we have been loving this. I don't know why it took me a year to make apple butter. I've been putting this in baked oatmeal, putting it in steel cut oats, and putting it on toast. We've just really been enjoying apple butter. From the apple butter, we have raspberry jam, rhubarb jam, cranberry sauce, blueberry jam, strawberry jam, peach jam, and plum jam. So I don't need to make jam anytime soon because we have a lot of jam. We use jam in a bunch of different ways, not just on toast. We use it when we sweeten our yogurt. I like to buy plain yogurt, and then we will put a dollop of jam in it to sweeten it and flavor it. We use it on French toast, on waffles, on pancakes, and all sorts of things. And so we don't just use it for toast. And so we do go, oh, and I also like to use it to flavor baked oatmeal. Josh loves baked oatmeal. And so I will open up a jar and kind of swirl it in, and that's how I like to sweeten baked oatmeal. So that's why we do have a lot of jam. And then down here are beverages, actually. So here, this is something we made last winter together, and it is strawberry lemonade concentrate. This summer for barbecues, this came in so handy. It also makes a really good cocktail starter. It's just sugar, lemon juice, and strawberries, and it is phenomenal. And then here, this winter, we also preserved up rhubarb juice, and this is a great cocktail starter. It also makes a great kind of like lemonade drink because it's got some tartness to it, and it's delicious. And then here we have apple cider and pear cider. Down here we have applesauce in quarts and then applesauce in pints. This was new to me this year. This is mock pineapple. It's just shredded zucchini and pineapple juice. I made 2, 4, 6, 7 pints of these. 1 pint makes the perfect amount for a mock pineapple cake. We made it together and it was phenomenal. So good. It basically just tasted like pineapple cake. But I need to think of other ways to use this. So if you have any ideas on how you would use mock pineapple, please let me know, because I don't need to make 2, 4, 6, 7 upside down, or they weren't upside down. They were just a bundt. It was a bundt pineapple cake. I don't need to make 7 of those. They were delicious, but I would like to think of other ways to use this. So if you have any suggestions for me, that would be fantastic. And then we have some blueberries. These were blueberries from the last Homestead. These are in some sugar, and I like to use these in muffins or in baked oatmeal, whatever I need blueberries for. And then here we have some peaches. I did not can peaches this year because last year I canned enough for last year and this year. I still have 2, 4, 6 quarts and 2 pints. When I do canning projects, I do like to, if I can, no pun intended, can enough for 2 years so that I don't have to make the same thing twice, especially if it's labor intensive. Now that's not true for everything. Like I made this, there's no way I would get 2 years out of this relish. I'd have to make too much. Or I don't ever grow enough salsa verde to get 2 years worth of salsa verde. But something like the enchilada sauce, where I had to purchase the dried chilies to make that, I made enough for 2 years so that I don't have to make enchilada sauce, and I did that with the peaches. This year I didn't have to can peaches, but I know that we will go through that many peaches this year, so next year I will be canning peaches for sure. From the fruit shelf, we have our kind of protein and veggie shelf. So here we have black beans that we grew on the homestead. We canned them up, and we now have homegrown black beans on the pantry shelf in the convenience of a jar. We also have white beans and a year's worth of pinto beans in pints, plus we have a few quarts of pints of beans. Those are pinto beans as well. I now can my beans different than I used to, so if you watched how I canned these beans this year, I am so happy with how these beans turned out. They taste absolutely delicious. The texture is perfect, and I am so excited to have those on my pantry shelf. Last year, we were able to grow black beans, and I'm hoping one of my goals next year is to learn how to grow pinto beans, and we will see if I'm successful next year. Now, moving down to this shelf here, I have homemade beef broth, and then next time I make beef broth, I want to do some pints, so that's why I left that shelf empty there. Now this is chicken, potatoes in broth, potatoes in water, green beans, and corn. These 2 items are new to me this year. We like the canned corn, but we prefer it frozen. I wanted to experiment with pressure canning corn because I have never done it before. Now there are some items on these shelves that are water bath canned. Most of the fruit and tomato products or condiments are high acid foods, and you can water bath can those. But things like corn, green beans, potatoes, beans, chicken, broth, these are low acid foods and they need to be pressure canned. And so I had never learned to pressure can corn until this year. And we like it, but we like the flavor of the frozen better for fresh eating. So if I'm going to turn it into a salsa or something like that, or a corn salad, you know, with a can of black beans or something like that, we prefer the frozen. But if I'm going to make a chili or a soup, we haven't really noticed the difference between frozen or fresh, or frozen or canned, because the canned are cooked. And so then it's nice to have a jar of canned, but I will always continue to freeze corn because it is so delicious. It's one of our favorite things we preserved. Now this year, I canned beans for the first time, and I canned individual varieties of beans. So I actually marked on the top of the jar what varieties went in what jar, and I made sure I only had one variety in each jar. And surprisingly, we really like the convenience of canned beans. All I have to do is open a jar, heat it up on the stove, add some salt, because I didn't salt these, and maybe a pat of butter or not, and they're delicious. We have frozen ones too, but I think I'm starting to like the canned ones better. And this year was my first year experimenting with it, and I'm loving it. Now, one thing I really like that I did was can the individual varieties. Fresh eating, we like, these are jade green beans. Jade green beans the best. Yep, I was just double checking. And my plan for next year is only to grow jade green beans. Contender green beans used to be my favorite, but this year, growing them side by side, we preferred the jade green beans. They were tender. They just were tender longer. And something really interesting to note, the seeds on the contender green beans kind of turn a little bit brown. They taste fine, but when you look at the jade green bean seeds, they stay white. And this is more appetizing to me. They taste almost the same, but we like the look of this better. So next year for fresh eating, we like the jade green beans better. You can't really taste a difference between the jade green beans and the contender green beans in the jar, but these look a whole lot prettier. So this is what I'm going to be jarring up next year. So that was just kind of a fun little experiment. I wanted to talk about canned meat for just a second. So the first time I heard of people canning meat, I thought that was really weird and kind of disgusting sounding, to be honest. But then I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. because why not? I'm learning to pressure can, I'm learning to can beans. Why not try it? So I did. And the way that I have canned this chicken is I roast whole chickens, I pull the meat off the bone, and then I put the meat in the jar, and then I fill it up with broth and I pressure can it. This stuff is delicious. If you need cooked meat super quickly, this stuff tastes delicious. These are pasture-raised chickens from a local farm, and it is amazing to have a convenience item like pre-cooked chicken, because usually when I'm cooking something, the thing that takes the longest is cooking the meat. And half the time, because I buy most of my meat in bulk, my meat is frozen. So then I have to remember to thaw it and then cook it and then make the meal. But I can make really quick enchiladas if I have tortillas on hand. I've got homemade enchilada sauce and chicken, shred some cheese, easy dinner. Now, on the other hand, you will see no ground beef or sausage. I do not like it. I think it is off-putting the flavor. Now that's just my personal preference. I know that a lot of people in the canning community love canned ground beef, but I tried it. I did not like it. I will never do it again. But that's the beauty of experimenting, is sometimes you try something like these beans. I didn't think I was gonna like these because I don't buy canned green beans, but we absolutely love them. And so it's good to experiment and try and learn and then see if you want to continue. And I don't want to continue with canning ground beef. That's why you don't see any here. But the next thing down here, I absolutely love on my pantry shelf. And that is chicken broth in all different sizes and then some pork broth. I used to only can broth in quarts, and then I realized some recipes, and a lot of recipes, only call for 1 cup of broth or 2 cups of broth. So why was I canning everything in quarts when sometimes you only need 1 cup or 2 cups? So this year I have canned a ton of broth. This is chicken broth in pints, a ton of it in half pints, and then a ton of it in quarts. And this gives me flexibility so that when I need broth, I'm not opening up a quart every time and then putting half of it in my refrigerator and then having to figure out what I'm gonna do with the other half. Broth is the #1 reason why I wanted to learn how to pressure can, because it is very expensive, especially now for some reason, to buy a high quality broth at the grocery store when you can make it at home for basically for free. If you roast a whole chicken, you can make broth for free, because what else are you going to do with the carcass or the bones? You're going to turn it into homemade broth. Well, I have been making homemade broth for years. One of my most inspirational cooks is Ina Gartner, and she always uses in her home cooking homemade broth. And so since the day Josh and I got married, I have always made homemade broth. And I used to freeze it. Well, I was running out of freezer space because I wanted to buy half a cow, half a pig, or a whole pig. And I could not afford to put broth in the freezer and the meat in the freezer. That had to take priority for freezer space. And so I wanted to learn to pressure can, and that's what I have done here. So if you get a pressure canner, it will pay for itself very, very quickly if you learn to make broth, because you can make it for pennies on the dollar what you can purchase it at the grocery store. So I love canning broth. And then that got me into canning beans because it's just fun. I just love it. So that is all, I think, the canned goods. And that is quite a few canned goods. And now we can go into these buckets down here. These buckets have a bunch of stuff in them. We've got rolled oats, we've got steel cut oats, we've got about 6 different varieties of rice. Josh and I like rice. We have wheat berries to grind into flour, which I need to actually get a new wheat grinder. I currently do not have a wheat grinder. The one that I had, I don't like. It was the KitchenAid attachment. It doesn't grind the flour fine enough. And I used to grind all our own flour, and then I was realizing I couldn't get good baked goods out of the ground flour because it couldn't grind it fine enough. So if you guys have any recommendations, I have 2 in my Amazon cart, and I haven't fully decided which one I want to go with. So if you guys have any recommendations, please give them to me, because I want to start grinding my own flour again. Josh and I love the taste of fresh ground flour. It's nutty, it's delicious. And so that is a winter thing I want to start to get into this winter, is grinding my own flour again. I also have dried beans in the back of these buckets, and I've got white flour and some wheat flour and things like that in the buckets. I also have popcorn and salt. So now we can get into, oh, here are some other things I had canned. I almost forgot about this. These are meals in a jar. My mother-in-law came over and she taught me how to make meals in a jar. So the first one is chipotle beef, shredded beef, and it is delicious. And then we have chicken base. So it's got celery, carrots, onions, chicken broth. And so it's basically a chicken noodle soup starter or a chicken pot pie starter. And then we have pork roast and salsa verde chicken, which is delicious. Those are basically just open the jar and heat them up. For the salsa verde chicken and the chipotle beef, the chicken base and the pork are things that once you open them, they need a little bit of other things added to them. But those are really nice to have and really convenient. I forgot about those because I'm not used to having those because that's a new item to me. Down here, I have my wine collection. There's some really cheap bottles of wine down here, plus some nicer bottles that I've collected over the years. I know that I need to invest in a wine rack, or I need to ask Josh maybe this winter to build me a wine rack so that I can store those bottles on their side. I know you don't want to store wine bottles with their corks facing up because the wine bottles dry out, or the cork dries out at the top, but that's just not a project we have gotten to. Honestly, I think before Josh has time to build me a wine rack, he needs to build me a new chicken coop. And so, but that is a future plan. So that's that. So let's get into, okay, so this is fun stuff. This is homegrown things. So here we have homegrown red potatoes, russet potatoes, and then small russet potatoes, and then a white potato, and some store-bought, what are those called? Sweet potatoes. I don't know why I did not try to grow sweet potatoes this year because they are one of my favorite things to eat. It's probably because I've only tried to grow them one other year and they were a complete failure. And so next year though, I'm going to devote an entire raised bed to sweet potatoes. I get a lot more sun here at this homestead, which can heat up my soil. Sweet potatoes like warmth. And so I think I'm going to do better growing sweet potatoes here than I did at my last garden. My last garden was in a ton of shade, and so they did very, very poorly. But next year's goal is to grow sweet potatoes. We also have these butternut squash. I have 2, 4, 6, 7 of these. I haven't eaten these yet. I'm excited when we crack into these, we will try them together. They're supposed to be extremely sweet. They're a personal size butternut squash. And then we've got some other pumpkins here that are still ripening. And then over here we have some pumpkins. These ones are nice and ripe, so we need to process these coming up pretty soon. I think I want to freeze dry a bunch of it. These pumpkins, I'm not sure if they're going to ripen, but we'll give them a chance. I'll just leave them down here and see if they ripen on us. And then here are the homegrown onions we strung up. And then we also have onions over here. This top box and this basket are homegrown onions. And then these 3 boxes, 1, 2, 3, are onions I purchased from a local farm. I used to purchase all my tomato products from him when we lived in suburbia, and I wasn't growing any tomatoes. And then when I wasn't growing enough tomatoes for a year, I would buy my tomatoes from him. I don't need to buy tomato products or tomatoes from him anymore, but I still buy onions from him because my onions, I didn't grow enough for a year's worth. And so I'm totally happy supporting my local farmer and trying to get a year's worth of onions put up. So these onions that we have are not all the onions. I also have already freeze-dried a bunch of them for onion powder. I have diced and sliced a bunch of them for the freezer for convenience. And then these are what we have fresh here, and I'm really excited to have them on the pantry shelf. This bucket and this bucket, one is white flour, one is sugar. We go through a lot of both because we do a lot of cooking here, and so we go through a lot of that. So that's why I have extra big buckets for those items. Now we can kind of get into the store-bought items, which is these 2 shelves here. Starting up here, I guess we'll start up here and work our way down. We have, well, let's start over here. We have toilet paper, paper towels. Now that is not all the way to the back with the paper towels. It's just too deep because I can't reach any more than that. We try to use cloth, but we like to have paper towels for dirty messes. And then this is baking soda, lots of different kinds of salt. We have Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, real salt in a bunch of different sizes. Up here we have blackstrap molasses, honey, and a ton of vinegars. We have rice vinegar, red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, distilled vinegar, apple cider vinegar for canning, and then apple cider vinegar that's raw. These vinegars were up in my upstairs pantry, but I decided to bring them down here because I have little bottles in my kitchen that I use for cooking when it comes to these vinegars. So the refillable gallons are up here. Vinegar is not going to go bad. So a gallon, I can get it and keep it down here and just refill my smaller jars. Now this shelf and this shelf are all different shapes of pasta. I do make homemade pasta, but I like to have a bunch of different pastas on hand as well. We've got egg noodles, large macaroni noodles, small macaroni noodles, jumbo shells, lasagna, white spaghetti, whole wheat spaghetti, penne. I'm not sure how to say that. We like to make a pasta salad with this, egg noodles, and then we have different rice noodles for pad thai. We have rice papers for making spring rolls. We've got ramen noodles and noodles to make pho. Down here is where we have kind of like the condiment type things that are store-bought. We've got peanut butter. This is one of my favorite things to get at Trader Joe's. It's heavy cream that's shelf-stable. We have coconut milk, condensed milk, chipotles and adobo, olives, Frank's Red Hot capers, Mama Lily peppers. These are kind of a pickled pepper that are really, really good on pizza, dried cranberries for salads, ketchup, mustard, tomato paste, better than bouillon curry powder. Now, I've never made this before. I want to try making this winter. I have a meatball recipe that's an orange sour, sweet and sour meatball that uses this, and so I want to try making this from scratch. Hoisin sauce, balsamic vinegar, coconut aminos, soy sauce, and then some things. We're going to do some Christmas baking. We're going to make some cookies and some truffles and some candies. And so as I've been collecting the things for the different recipes we're going to make, that's kind of what this section of the pantry shelf has been dedicated to. So we're going to be using those coming up pretty soon. And over here we have oils. We have some avocado spray, coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. Coming up here, we've got some juices and lemon juice. I like to keep this on hand for canning. Plus, I also like it for when I don't have fresh lemons. We have raspberry leaf tea and coffee, some crackers, chips. Now, we've got one last shelf down here, and then we can go upstairs. This is kind of like the household goods shelf plus my extra jars. I have 2 shelves of extra jars in all different various sizes, and then this is my canning supplies. We've got pectin and extra lids and citric acid for making different recipes we need to make. So I just have that in there. And then here we kind of have like our toiletries. Here, extra toothbrushes and toothpaste and shampoo and soap. Oh, I do want to next year try to grow loofah. That's what this is. We love loofah. And I tried growing it one year. I did not get the seeds to germinate. So next growing season, loofah is going to be on my list. And then here we just have some household things like Ziplocs and latex, or they're not latex gloves, they're nitrile gloves, parchment paper, some cleaning supplies, household things, candles. We lose power here a lot, so I like to keep candles on hand. So let's go upstairs and I'm going to show you what the pantry looks like upstairs because it looks different than it did last time we were in it. So here is what the upstairs pantry looks like. It looks a lot different than last time you were in it. Last time you were here, there were jars all on these shelves. It was completely full. These shelves were too deep, and now it is just a lot emptier. And I am so much happier with how this looks. It just is minimal and a lot more organized. So I'll show you what I have in here and what I decided to keep in this upstairs pantry. Oh, also there used to be a bunch of buckets here. Those are gone too. They're not gone, they're just not here anymore. So first I have this basket. This has my rings in it when I do canning projects. I've got all my big mixing bowls here, and then I've got a lot of empty space. And here I have all of my serving dishes. Coming down here, I've got a few of some bulk items that I do keep up here because we go through them quite a bit, which is rice. We eat a lot of rice, and so I like to have rice up here. Also lentils. I only have lentils up here. I don't have them downstairs, so I'm keeping them up here. Freeze-dried liver for the dogs. Tea for us. This is freeze-dried mashed potatoes, which is one of the best convenience items ever. I just make mashed potatoes just like I would want to eat them, throw them in the freeze dryer, and then all you have to do to reconstitute them is put water, because we put the milk and the butter and everything in them when we freeze dry them. So basically homemade instant mashed potatoes, which is phenomenal. These are freeze dried cucumbers that are shredded for making things like homemade tzatziki sauce. Phenomenal. And then this is freeze dried zucchini, and we've been going through this like crazy. When I want to make a really easy dinner and I don't have time to chop a bunch of vegetables, I've been throwing a few handfuls of this in it, and it is amazing. You can't even taste it. You're adding vegetables. It's really good in meatloaf and meatballs as the breadcrumb replacer. One of our favorite things, or one of my favorite things that I freeze dry. Especially with how prolific my zucchinis were this year. I love this stuff. And then here we have dried pears and dried mangoes all in one jar. We've got cocoa powder, white chocolate chips, mini chocolate chips, tapioca starch, coconut, powdered milk. I like to keep this on hand for baking when I run out of fresh milk. If you need bread that calls for milk, this is a great way to use it, or baked oatmeal. Anytime you're baking and you don't have fresh milk, powdered milk is really nice. Almond flour, we're going to be using this to make some banquette here at Christmas time. Vanilla sugar, I totally forgot I made this until I organized this pantry the other day. I put vanilla beans in sugar that I had used to make vanilla extract. I dehydrated them and then I put them in here. And I am so excited that I remembered I had this because I want to use it in a bunch of Christmas baking. And then here, it was just a way to use up the vanilla beans from spent vanilla beans from the vanilla making process. And so that's what that is. And then we have masa for making corn tortillas, steel cut oats for breakfast, and then homemade granola for breakfast. I cleared a ton of the space off of this area just for nice, and just looks nice. I still do have my plastic wrap and foil and parchment paper on there because there's too big. They're Costco size. They don't fit in any of my drawers. And then down here, I reorganized this. I put my buckets. I have sugar, flour, and oats here because I go through a lot of them. I do keep these up here still just to restock my supply. I have my bag of bags. I've got my Bosch mixer, my homemade vanilla that's brewing, my small appliances, my colander, my vacuum sealer, and then my glass baking dishes and foil baking dishes. And that, my friend, is my Homestead Pantry tour. Stay tuned though, because the next thing we are going to tour is my deep freezers and my stand-up freezer, so you can see what I have in those if you kind of want a full picture of what my pantry and freezers look like going into winter. I typically participate in a pantry challenge put on by Jessica at Three Rivers Homestead every January and February, where I do not go grocery shopping basically for 2 months. Usually what I do is I give myself a budget of about $40 a month for things like fresh dairy products and a little bit of fresh produce. But typically when I participate in that pantry challenge, I am focusing on eating what I have preserved. It was a lot of work to preserve these goodies, and I want to make sure that we eat it and enjoy it. And I'm just so excited how this year went. I think we got some of my absolute new favorite things on the pantry shelf that are going to become staples that are always going to be on my pantry shelf. The roasted marinara sauce, just for one example. I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. If you want to watch a few of my other videos between now and my freezer tour, I will pop those here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.